all very much for coming. If I need to speak up, as my spouse is telling me, I will. My mic is on.
It's on.
It's on.
You took it
How
out.
about now? Maybe it's not on.
Testing.
Ooh, that one's on.
It's on.
You have to put it where.
You look closer to your mouth.
The left one. High tech.
Hello.
Yeah, but we want you to be heard. Oh, yeah. Blow in my ear, I'll follow you anywhere. Welcome, thank you so much for coming today. It was a gorgeous day. I know you all were meant to be out at the Folsom Street Fair, but you're here. This is just as political. So I want to introduce you to our friends and panelists. First, we have the author of the play, This Bitter Earth, which is running right now, and hopefully you all are going to see afterwards. Harrison David Rivers on the end here. In addition to This Bitter Earth, Harrison David Rivers' plays include Sweet at National Black Theater, and She Would Stand Like This, and Look Upon Our Lowliness at the Movement Theater Company. When Last We Flew, which won the GLAAD Media Award for Outstanding New York Theater, Where Storms Are Born at Williamstown Theater Festival, and which won the Edgerton.
Yeah, but you know, we can call it whatever.
We can call it whatever we want, because he's probably dead now. The Edgerton Foundation New Play Award, among others. Some of his other awards include Emerging Artist of Color Fellowship at the New York Theater Workshop, the Van Leer Fellowship at New Dramatists. He was named core writer at Playwright Center in Minneapolis. He has his MFA from Columbia School of the Arts and a BA from Kenyon College. This Bitter Earth will receive its second production at Penumbra Theater in Minneapolis in spring of 2018. We have, beside him, Kwesi Wilkerson. Taryn Kwesi Wilkerson is a published author, spoken wordsmith, and emerging poet. He is also an alumnus of the Emerging Arts Professional SFBA 2016-2017 Fellowship. Kwesi began writing poetry to chronicle a deeply introspective journey while traveling abroad in Ghana, West Africa. Those memoirs evolved into his first full-length collection of poems, Pieces of My Soul, Volume 1, which is now available through Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. He now performs at venues throughout the San Francisco Bay Area, most recently headlining Twitter HQ's first ever poetry night and the Congresswoman Barbara Lee event. Ooh. And Sean Haynes is the project manager for Bayard Rustin LGBT Coalition. He's also the founder and executive director of San Francisco Impact Partners and founder of SHH Social Media Services. He has a keen and critical eye on public policy, community affairs, social justice, and Democratic Party politics. Oh,
Right.
We need you. His goals are to effect the remediation of disparities that impact communities that are most in need. His track record of public service, advocacy, and political activism is extensive. Sean is an associate member of the San Francisco Democratic Party. He is founder and president of San Francisco Black Community Matters. He was elected in 2015 to the position of Assembly District Delegate, and he was appointed to serve on the San Francisco Human Rights Commission, LGBT Advisory Committee, Commissioner on the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force, and the African American Advisory Committee of the 17th Assembly District. We also will perhaps have another panelist who might be held up at the Folsom Street Fair, who we hope will arrive shortly, and we'll just fold her in and keep going. Thank you all very much for coming. My name is Jewel Gomez. I'm playwright in residence here at the theater, and I'm really excited to talk about these things with these activists and writers and poets. So I'm going to start with you, actually, Kwesi, because I think one of the things that happens with artists is that sense of we're just doing our art and that's all. And I think we forget, people outside of the art form really forget how important art is to any kind of activism. You want to talk a little bit about how you felt about that and how you came to be a poet? To be a poet. I mean, Ghana is a very poetic place. I actually was the university there too. But that was before you were born.
Yeah.
So,
Excellent question. So I will say that I recognize art as, well, not just art, art is existence. Art is the way that we live, and that's just so me as a poet, like I use words as my vessel to translate my experience as a black man, as a human being here on earth. And I also realize the legacy that I'm a part of. Like, art has always been part of us as a people, as a species, as human beings. And I realize that it's so important for me to use my art for a greater purpose. And that's to tell stories, essentially, to try and create change. Because I don't want to get too deep too fast, but people are dying. You know, human beings are dying. We are dying. That's unacceptable to me. And I realize that I've been given a gift, and I've been put here on this earth for a very particular reason. And part of that reason is to create change. Even if it's in a small way, I'm creating change for somebody. And who knows who they're going to inspire to create change and continue that legacy and tradition. That's it.
absolutely. You know, it's Fannie Lou Hamer in the early 70s really talked about how civic engagement was not a right, it was a necessary thing. And in order for democracy to thrive and grow, we as people had to have civic engagement. And I know when I was in school, you had the civics courses which taught you about civic engagement. Tell me, since you work in democratic politics, how you came to take that advice so sincerely and seriously.
I didn't come into a later age to take this work on. I'm wearing this t-shirt because Martin Luther King is one of the reasons why I got inspired. I was actually at a bar here in San Francisco, and just the way I talk to people, I guess it impacts people and affects people in a very positive way. And this person said something offhanded to me, and he later came up to apologize, but also to say that he felt that I was giving him this energy that was like Martin Luther King. So when somebody tells you that, it's kind of like your life is going to stop and you're really going to evaluate what you're doing in the world and what you want to do with your time here in the world. And for me, I was already doing things that were moving me in this direction. I've always wanted to do things in the nonprofit world to create things that would support our community. And this carried into the political world, trying to bring the voice of the community into effective opinions of our power, the leadership here in San Francisco and the leadership here in the world. And since that day on, I have been on like a spiritual and political journey to understand how to speak with the people, how to work with them, how to understand what their needs are, and then how to use that knowledge to advocate on their behalf. So everything I've been doing over the last several years is to understand the community I was born and raised here in San Francisco, to speak on their behalf with their voice, which is something that I don't believe every leader necessarily does. They may speak to issues more broadly, and they may speak to certain constituencies, but my personal dynamic is to bring the voice of the people and to speak with the voice of the people. And that's one of the things that makes me most passionate about the things that I do, because when I'm having a conversation with small groups or individuals, I see a spirit, I see love, and that is the energy that fuels my ability to do any of this work, because we all know it's very difficult.
I love that you said that this person said this to you in a bar.
Yes.
I love that, because I think the value of how we understand politics, it's not that it's something that happens just in the ballot box. It's not something that happens on, the Rachel Maddow show.
Right.
But that it's something we live with on a day-to-day basis, just like our art, and we can hear what people need and what people want us to do, the action people need by just listening,
Absolutely.
anywhere we are. Harrison, will you talk a little bit about how you came to write your play? And we're going to talk about this later when we do our one-on-one, I think, at the Museum of the African Diaspora. But how you came to do your play on such a specific topic? Was there something that sparked you, a specific incident that you can tell us about?
Well, I want to go back just for a second because I feel like there's some beautiful things being said here that are true for me as well. That there's something about looking around at your community when you're involved in that community and realizing where the dearths are, where are the holes, what don't we have, who's not there, who's not speaking, like who doesn't have a voice. And I feel like that's where I started writing. I started writing from a place of, this person has something to say and nobody has ever asked them to say something. And so they need a play. Because that's the thing that I can do. You know, you can poet, you know, and you can politically be and I can write a play. So I was like, that person needs a play. So now they have a play, you know. So I think that's sort of where I came from. I came from what we don't have that we need. And I think that also that is part of the reason why this play came into being. Ed said to me, I think there needs to be a play about what is happening in America right now. And not just like a general play, but a play that like resonates with you in some personal way. And I, you know, started, I wrote several beginnings of several plays that didn't have anything to do with me. They had to do with what was going on in America, but they didn't have anything to do with me. And I think there was a moment where I had to get really real with myself and say, how am I going to look at the issue, you know, Black bodies in America and what is happening to them on it seems like it's happening every day. Like something is happening every day. Something is happening every day, and how do I feel about that? And if I don't feel anything about that, or if I feel this way or that way, then I need to be honest about that. And that needs to be the play. And people can, you know, agree or disagree with like where I'm at in my process, but I need to be honest about that. Because if anybody else is where I am, like it might be nice for them to hear that somebody else is also on that journey toward learning and understanding and figuring out how they're going to be involved. So.
All right. Lovely, thank you. So I want to introduce J. Marie Hill. Thank you for climbing over the Folsom Street Fair to get here. And I'm going to introduce you. J. Marie Hill is a Black Boricua and white masculine queer woman born and raised in the Bay Area. She's a graduate of Stanford University with a BA in Theater and Performance Studies, and the University of Southern California with an MA in Teaching. In all of her work as a teacher, mentor, arts administrator, and artist, she seeks to support artists and organizations that further her desire to help youth and people of color feel empowered to take on the task of healing and transforming their communities and our world. Her participation in the invite-only Brown Boy Project in 2010, one of my favorite groups, a national leadership development program for masculine-centered people of color, helped reground her focus in a desire to elevate art and Blackness as a tactic to achieve liberation for people of all backgrounds. She found that in her current position at Robert Moses Kin, and resonates deeply with RMK's mission to create phenomenal art that, rather than look beyond the differences that make us human, both recognizes and celebrates those differences. Marie, thank you for coming. And I want to talk just a little bit, have you talked just a little bit about youth, working with youth, and what do you find something different about how youth approach activism from, I mean, not that you're that old, but from when you were developing your own insights?
Yeah, well, thank you all for having me. Apologies that I walked in, you know, significantly not at 1 o'clock. You know what I'm saying? Black people time we out here.
Right on top.
The meat is here. So I want to that bio is actually, it's always going to be true. I'm not actually no longer working at Robert Moses' dance company. That's a phenomenal organization, everybody should know about that. And so the work that I do now is actually kind of, it's more national than it is local, which means that I'm not working with youth as directly as I was. But as far as the folks that I do come in contact with, like most recently, I'm spending most of my time in St. Louis these days, which many of you might know is the foundation of like Ferguson, right? And the work that kind of sprang up there a couple years ago, and timely enough, right, we're right in the middle of another uprising, as another police officer recently got off for killing a black man and planting a gun and all that. And so what I have noticed is, while young people may not be very, very specifically focused on strategy, right, or have all the nuance of the policy and the pieces that we wish they did as older folks that we've learned over the years, what's important is their ability to be honest about their feelings and be clear about what they want as opposed to what they don't want, right? So we may not know how to go from the feelings that we're very used to having been alive for a little longer. We're like, oh, we know it's frustrating, we know they're not going to listen, or whatever, that piece, to listening to the fury of a young person who is in no way, in any kind of way, about to be as patient as we've been as older folks. And so I think there's just the same way that I feel about any kind of oppression is like when people are honest and they find the power to tell you that they're hurting them, what's the only appropriate response is to say, how can I help, not have you be hurt anymore. Like, what am I doing to perpetuate this, and how can I make sure that it doesn't happen anymore? So whether it's a young black person, whether it's a queer person, whether it's a young gay white man, like there's all these different ways that people are finally, it takes power to get to that point, right? Where you can say, I'm hurting, I need you to help me, or you must help me. Whatever that journey is, there's a dignity in it. And every time I hear somebody cry out, my only role is to say, what can I do to help? So as an older group of people, whoever we are, wherever you find yourself, when you hear somebody crying out, your goal is to say, wow, what am I doing? And there's so many fires springing up, right? Today, every day, yesterday, tomorrow. But the point is, how are we leveraging every privilege that we have, every point of power, every point of passion that we have to make sure that our lives are in progress towards facing these things? Because every one little thing, most of us can't respond to every single thing. But if our lives are lived in the path of, being of service to these wounds that people are yelling at us or gaping open, if our lives can be in a pattern of being abandoned, then it's a little bit easier to respond to every little thing, because you know that you're on their side no matter what. It's just about how can I show now in response to this particular thing or in response to that particular outcry. Yeah. So I think that's just the thing that I've learned from young people, is not to shy away from the feelings, but to actually run towards it and say, what can I do with you for you?
I mentioned Fannie Lou Hamer earlier, and another thing that she said, which was always interesting to me, is because it's a little bit different from the general civil rights movement position, but she was very clear. The dominant culture, whatever they give you, they will take you back. And so we need to just get out there and get what we feel should come to the culture, come to the people. And it's interesting to see a younger generation feeling like, no, I'm not going to wait necessarily for the processes. I'm going to take this to the public so that everyone can see it. And I think that is, to some degree, what the civil rights movement did, but this is even more so because it's on all these different fronts.
I mean, the reality, I think, of this moment, in any moment since literally the founding of this country, right, is that we have come farther and farther away from the very specific realities, the material conditions that were set in place to form this country, right? And the farther away we get, the more the bad things spider into all these different institutions and places. And so we might think that the farther away we get, the better we're doing, but in reality, the farther away we get, the more coded things are becoming. That's all it is. It doesn't change what has happened and what has been happening for a very long time. So the point, I think, is more so, how are we, like what Fannie Lou Hamer also said, is let's become one hell of a majority. And so like the goal is not, to distance yourself from the difficulties of it. The goal is to say, wow, this happened and my denying it isn't going to make it better, right? My denying it is only going to kind of push it away for someone else to solve. And at the end of the day, if you're not solving something, you're contributing to the problem. And if you're not actively figuring out how to be in service again, like you're going to be kind of pushing the realities away and really being a part of the problem. So I think, that there is an invigorated point that we're at right now, but I think the goal of this moment, and as I've learned from people in St. Louis, like, they may not have had a goal or a specific idea at the very beginning, they just knew that they were fed up, right? And when working class, regal, black people are fed up, like, something's wrong, because those are the same folks that, we're all descended from these folks that were enslaved, and every time somebody who was enslaved in any way speaks up, it is our duty, those of us who are maybe chained a little bit less, to kind of reach back and say, not even reach back, right, but reach over and say, like, your dignity is intact, and I may have forgotten that, but, like, you're reminding me, and you're maybe even helping me see the deepest, most honest, grieving parts of myself. So how am I awakening to this larger form of humanity and this larger goal to serve all of us as, in the ways that we all deserve to be served? And how am I, taking off the band-aids of what I've thought is, oh, this is just how society is. Like, when I take those kind of gauzes off, what's underneath there is possibility. It's a wound, but it's a possibility. It's like, what happened, your skin can heal it even better when you actually put something on, right? As opposed to just cover it up and hope that it just heals by itself.
Let me ask you, yes, Quincy. Please, yes.
So I really want to bring it home. I really want to bring this home, and I really want everybody to be able to take something away from this conversation. And what I really want to say is that it's not just the soul of America that's at stake, it's the soul of white people. So you can be honest, it's the soul of white people. And I say that because white people may not be the numbers majority, but they're the power majority. And the fact that most of those in power can just sit by and watch what's happening happen, that is absolutely unacceptable. That is absolutely unacceptable, and it's getting to the point where the oppressed, like essentially black and brown people, are running out of options. And it's how many of us have to die before you are moved to make change? And more often than not, it's just like signing your name on a piece of paper. Or, we really need you out there in the streets. To be completely honest, we really need you out there in the streets. We need your presence, we need your faces. And what the difference is, which I hope I'm not getting too far ahead, but the difference between now and the civil rights movement is that during the civil rights movement, they were aiming for integration. Because that's where the power was, that's where the resources were. So we put our kids into concentration camps, and we call it the public education system. And we're still suffering from that to this day. But what else can we do? Integration was a failed experiment, a terribly failed experiment, and our kids are being called nigger on the playground. That's unacceptable. I am not going to, speaking as a millennial, I'm not going to allow that to happen to my children. So what am I going to do to change it? Because we can't integrate further into the belly of the beast. So what options do we have left? And that's what I want you all to take away. Like, what options do we have left? Because it's getting ugly. If you haven't heard about what's happening in St. Louis, look it up. Google St. Louis right now, it's going down there again.
I think also one of the things that happened with that integration into the belly of the beast was not a consideration by the movement of economics in any way. Because so much is about the economics and people holding on to their economic advantages. And after a while, I think young African Americans began to feel like, well, where's my economic advantage? What am I going to get? I don't want a piece of the pie. I want a piece of the world as it is expanding, and the way that capitalism expands. Capitalism only expands by chewing people up and spitting them out. So I think a lot of younger African Americans understood that, at least viscerally, and that's when you turn to the things that are going to get you what you think is freedom, that is money and being able to make other people feel subject to you, power, in these very negative ways. And so that's one of the things I think. It's not just the soul of white people, I think it's the soul of people of color, because the reason there are drug cartels in Central and South America, I am going off on a tangent here, is because people feel hopeless. So they make cartel runners their heroes because they don't have other heroes. So anyway, how we save our souls, I think, is a big part of what we want to see, and I think art is very important in that.
Well, both of those examples, it's about options. If you don't have options, really, or if the options that are presented to you continue to spiral us down the rabbit hole that we've been spiraling down, but that is the option, and you have to choose something.
Right.
right? And if you don't have the support, or you don't have the love, or you don't have the the self-esteem, if you don't have that, and those things aren't easy, they aren't easy.
Right.
If you don't have them, then here's one option. This is the option. So I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do it well. Whatever that looks like, and whatever the effects of that are. So I think that this idea of options, what are the options? What are we presenting our communities with? And I'm not saying that that's easy either, because you have to figure out resources to provide more options, and then we go to economics, right? So it's all connected, it's all interconnected.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that Huey P. Newton said in 1970, which didn't get a lot of coverage, but it's certainly coming back around, I see it today in the movements today, was Huey said, I'm paraphrasing, we as a people, as a movement, really need to look to other oppressed people to reach out to them, to bond with them, and he explicitly mentioned homosexuals and women as oppressed groups that the Black Panther Party should be reaching out to and making common cause with, which of course got buried as quickly as it could. But it was such an insight for him as a young African-American revolutionary man to have in 1970, to see those movements having common cause. And what I see today in things like Black Lives Matters, even in the Occupy movement, was something that pulled all different kinds of people together. How do you see that ability to connect? And your play is about that in many ways.
Because I'll let you start here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Good shot.
I want to bring it into right. I'm like, ooh, yeah, I do. Just being born and raised here in San Francisco, just seeing things play here, both in our communities and in our various leadership groups. That is something that I've taken to heart, because it's something that I've read about and something that I've watched movies about, and something that I do actively myself, is to really engage with different communities. Being a native of San Francisco that has dealt with all of the socioeconomic issues, I have lived in every single neighborhood here in San Francisco, and over the course of my 4 years. And so I know people in different communities, and when I go to them and say, this is the issue that we are standing together with, or this is the issue that I stand with you because I have heritage and cultures that match your own. My skin is Black, but I've got Native American, I've got Muslim heritage, I've got other heritages. So when I speak to people, it comes with a different emphasis. And when I work with people, it comes with that emphasis of we need to come together on these issues, to stand with each other on these issues, and to fight with each other on these issues, because now we live, again, in a society where it's them against us. It's the power against the people. And that is why my personal dynamic has never been really to be completely aligned with power, because I like to get and create power with the community. Because we have so much more strength. We are more than anything else. The people are more than anything else in this world. There are more of us than them. They might got all the money in the world, but all the money in the world honestly doesn't really matter. If you have all the people in the world, then you can accomplish anything. So when it comes to pulling different communities together, that is our struggle. It's something that I've been speaking to lots of different groups who say, I'm not directly Latino, but I went out and marched with them in the last couple of weeks over all the DACA, because as African Americans, we have a significant number of people who are African American heritage that are affected by those decisions. I'm LGBT, I'm gay, but I'm not trans. But I stand with our trans community, and I tell my trans brothers and sisters, I'm not trans, I'm not going to speak first in your space, I'm going to wait until very last, but I want you to know that I'm here and I'm behind you on these issues, because they're coming at us, and we're together. And that is the same message that I take with them. We are together on these issues. I'm not a woman, but I can stand with my women and say, I've had some similar experiences, so yeah, I'm going to be down with you on these fights to make sure that you have what you have, because a woman brought me into this world, and a woman's going to bring the child that I want to have into this world, because I do dream about that as a future, having the ability to have a child and a family. I dreamt about her and I had tears, but I'm just not sure the the state of our world, when I'm going to be able to bring her into this world. So that is another reason why I do all these things that I do and fight with everybody to do it together, because I would love to have that child. You know, she was like 6 years old in my dream, and I woke up with tears. The tears I think are because I don't know when she's coming. And I don't know, I do know that I will fight to make this world a place that I will be comfortable bringing her into, but we have a lot of work ahead of us to do, so it requires you to make that happen.
Yeah, Pat Parker, the poet, said, "Where will you be when they come?" And they will come. So it's about continuing to feel that urgency that you talked about, Gracie, to not be complacent just because they're not coming at you right at this moment.
I wanted to connect those two things because there is the reality that, you know, for me, somebody who's Puerto Rican, black, my mom's real light skinned, but so I have white in me and all that, but the reality is like, it shouldn't need for us to be a part of that group for us to care, right?
Yeah.
So kind of going back to what I was saying is, and what I'm sure has been said in many versions already, like, how are you believing people when they tell you what they tell you so that you are in motion towards helping them through it, even if it doesn't impact you, right? And that's kind of what I say when we talk about deconstructing whiteness or figuring out how to like get beyond whiteness. I think that's one thing that ripping the soul kind of off is white people have been taught that this white thing that they may not have said it's whiteness. People have been taught who have been in proximity to power or success that if you just mind your business and follow the rules, you'll be okay. Right? And that's not true, and that's become like a white trope because white people haven't had to question anything further than that. They've just been in a group of people that have followed the rules and done whatever, you know, came as a result. But really what that means is they've kind of distanced themselves from the blood that has been shed. It doesn't mean that just because you're following the rules, I mean, law and order is the ultimate, like, most dangerous way to hold a society. People say, oh, the law and order candidate. If you look at Reagan, if you look at Trump, they are the most dangerous people because they just fall back on this trope of following the rules. Everybody who says, oh, they just deserved it, that black person that got killed, they probably say, oh, if you just follow the rules, listen to the officer when they say do whatever, you won't get killed. And it's like, that's not how humanity works, right? And so like, if people don't tend to question or don't teach themselves to question every single time that happens, then they're just kind of layering the reality of what it's like to be human in this world on just, oh, law and order. And so there's this really fundamental piece that if you're not pulling off the layer of comfort at every opportunity, you're just going to become a shell of a human because you're not dealing with the nuances, the intricacies of what it means to be a person, because you don't have to.
How do you, now this is for any of you who want to start with this answer, how do you, as viewing younger people and activism, think they view social media as part of their activism? I mean, I feel often it's a case of if I click on like about what's going on in, you know, St. Louis or wherever, then I've done my duty, which we know is not true. So, but do you see social media being used effectively in other ways?
Me personally, not at all. Not at all. I think that social media is the most passive form of activism that I've ever witnessed. And it's such a shame that so many people and I mean, I won't downtrodden it entirely because I know that I've learned things through social media, through logging on to Twitter. Like, that's how I found out about Philanthropy Steele and Owen Sterling. You know, at the same time, liking and retweeting and sharing is only going to do so much because people are suffering in real life, not virtually, not just because you see videos online. That means that's where the pain is. Like, the pain is in the communities, and we have to go to the source. We have to attack it at the source. We need to be in front of these police departments telling them this is unacceptable. You are paid because of our taxes. You are a public servant. You are sworn to protect and serve. What are you protecting? What are you serving? These are the questions we need to be asking, not on social media. I see people retweeting and replying to Donald Trump all the time. He doesn't give a shit. And if he does, like, it's just building up his ego. Why do we care so much about Donald Trump? He is one white man. One white man. And what, 60 million people voted for Donald Trump. This is who we need to be concerned about. And these were the people who weren't ashamed to go to the voting booths and put that check mark next to Donald Trump's name. I'm not saying Hillary would have been better. I'm not saying Bernie would have been better. But Donald Trump is a ferocious human being. And that's not even a strong enough word for what he is. But at the same time, he is a distraction. What we really need to be concerned about is our people in the streets. Our people are suffering in the streets, and social media, just for me, it's not It's not the way. Like keyboard activists and people who are getting a bunch of retweets and likes, what are you doing for the people? What are you doing for the community? What kind of work, what's on your resume besides I got 100,000 retweets? I'm popping today. Look at all these people liking my shit. No, but what are you actually doing for the people? And how are you alleviating the suffering? How are you pushing us closer to freedom? And these are the questions that we need to be asking, especially of the role models that we see, or so-called role models that we see on social media. But somebody else?
One of the things that people say social media can do is create an event. If you want people to show up. But beyond that, I don't know.
I mean, it's political education.
Yes.
At minimum.
I use social media for lots of different things. I'm a social media strategist. I started a small business in that. I've helped other people with their campaigns to get a message out to the community. I've used it with my own campaigns when I'm running for office here in San Francisco to communicate a message to a broader community. Because it's difficult being an individual trying to get out there, especially in the political sense when it's just one that needs to reach out to others. But I do agree that social media can only take us so far. It is great at getting the message out. It is great at getting people galvanized around the issue or to potentially show up. But the statistics on people, you invite 100 people, 20 people show up, depending on, the gravity of the situation. Because we had a lot of situations in San Francisco over the last few weeks that they were really coming for us and we responded. And so it wasn't just a few people that showed up, it was thousands of people that showed up. I think there were like 20 or 30, 40,000 people in San Francisco, when alt-right and crew tried to come to San Francisco to speak in front of us. And I'm on the other side of that as well, the opinion of, I do personally a lot of work here in San Francisco. I work with a lot of LGBT people to sort of change the dialogue of how we are in our communities and making sure that our communities are safer, making sure that our leaders in our community are working together, or at least know who each other are, so that we would come together in the Castro to say we're not down for that we're prepared to protect our people, we're prepared to create an opportunity for people who have not had the opportunity to be on stage to get up there on stage and say what they have to do. The other thing that I like to take away from using social media, but also using that in your face real world component is if I'm going to use this or if I'm going to be marching, I want to get your name and I want to get your number and I want to get you activated and involved. Like your spirit and energy is here and that's great, but I don't want you going home without us having that actual human connection of you're coming to the next thing and in addition to getting out there and speaking to the issues or being on stage or marching, here's what you can do to actually affect the situation, whether we're responding to legislation or we're responding to our leaders or we're responding to challenging situations in our communities. It's, for me, what I try to inspire is what we're actually doing on the ground. Mm-hmm. For me, I go into all of our communities in San Francisco and I'm not just there to be on stage. I'm usually the person that's been in the background helping to organize it. I'm usually the person that's helping the organizers get some of the pieces that they want. And so this is what I try to inspire into our youth, but also try to inspire people who are my age and people who are older, because we all need tools. And that's one thing that I'm noticing a lot recently, that people don't have the tools required to do some of this work. So a lot of things that I'm doing with my nonprofit organization is to start to create training opportunities for anti-bias, anti-racism, working with people who are working in these spaces, so that out of these spaces come the new resolutions, come the new policies, come the people who are ready to do the work and step forward.
I think we're going to have to stop now, but it sounds like two important things. One is, how do we turn social media into a tool so that it can educate people, not just have people feel relaxed because they pressed the like button, and also to go to the root of some of the issues. I would say, in addition to going to stand in front of the police stations, let's go to the police academies where they're being taught to behave the way they behave on the streets in our
Are you a strategist?
I'm just saying. So we're beginning here. I really appreciate you all coming out. Harrison, thank you so much for creating a